I am 71 years old. My name is Maxine, and I need you to stop whatever you are doing for just a moment. Put down your coffee cup, sit back in your chair, and truly listen to me. What I am about to tell you goes against absolutely everything society tells women, especially those of us over 45, and definitely those of us in our 60s and 70s. Society tells us a very specific, very dangerous story from the time we are little girls. They tell us that a woman without a man is an unfinished puzzle. They tell us that aging alone is a tragedy, a sad cautionary tale to be whispered about at family gatherings. They tell us we should be incredibly grateful for any male attention we can possibly get at our age, as if we are bruised fruit on a clearance rack, just hoping to be chosen before the grocery store finally closes its doors. But I am here to tell you the absolute brutal truth today. I am pulling back the heavy curtain. Inviting a new man into your life at this stage is very often the fastest, most efficient way to completely ruin a perfectly peaceful existence. I know this because I lived it. I am a black woman who has lived through enough seasons to know exactly who I am. I spent decades building a beautiful, stable life for myself. I survived the heavy storms of my younger years, the deep heartbreaks, the demanding bosses, and the endless, exhausting sacrifices of raising a family. And finally, I reached a place of pure tranquility. My home was my absolute sanctuary. The thermostat was set exactly how I liked it. The refrigerator was stocked with my favorite expensive organic fruit. I had pure, uninterrupted peace. I thought I was opening my heart to a beautiful final chapter of romance when I met a man named James. James was very charming at first. He wore freshly pressed, clean shirts. He brought me vibrant, fresh flowers. And he knew exactly how to compliment my smile to make me feel truly seen. He took me to lovely dinners. He pulled out my chair and he spoke beautifully about his past. I thought I had found a rare gem. I thought I had found an equal partner to share the beautiful sunset of my life with. But I soon realized a terrifying reality. I had not found an equal partner at all. I had accidentally adopted a senior citizen toddler. And this brings us directly to the first brutal truth of dating later in life. Truth number one, you do not get a romantic partner to share grand adventures with. You become an unpaid medical and emotional administrator. Let me break this down for you, because society will not tell you this part. When you are in your 20s or 30s, having a boyfriend means late-night telephone calls, spontaneous road trips, and dreaming about a big future together. When you take on a boyfriend in your 60s or 70s, the job description completely changes without anyone warning you. Within 3 short months, the romantic dates with James completely stopped. Instead of taking me to the downtown jazz concerts and beautiful art museums like we did in the very beginning, James started bringing all of his heavy baggage directly to my beautiful front door. I suddenly found myself spending my perfectly good Tuesday afternoons organizing his daily plastic pill containers. I had to learn the exact difference between his blood pressure medication and his cholesterol pills. I became the keeper of his medical schedule. Instead of waking up and listening to the sweet sound of the morning birds or my favorite soft jazz music, I had to sit quietly at my own kitchen table and listen to his endless, exhausting complaints. He complained about his aching lower back. He complained bitterly about his former wife who left him 20 years ago. He complained about his ungrateful adult children who never call him, completely ignoring the fact that it was his own job to pick up the telephone and call them himself. I was slowly drowning in his physical and emotional ailments. I constantly had to remind him to call his own doctor as if he were a helpless child and not a fully grown man who had managed to live for 7 decades before meeting me. I had to remind him to drink water. I had to remind him to eat green vegetables. Where is the romance in that? Where is the deep spiritual connection we are all promised? He did not want a true soulmate to share his life with. He wanted a human smart speaker that could also bake an excellent peach cobbler, rub his tired shoulders, and manage his daily calendar. Men like James are looking for a soft landing pad for their golden years. They want someone to absorb all of their anxiety, all of their pain, and all of their responsibilities. They see a strong, capable, peaceful woman, and they do not think about how they can add to her beautiful life. They only think about how she can make their own life easier. And here is the most painful part of truth number one. Your natural empathy, your beautiful giving heart becomes your absolute prison. Women are conditioned to be caregivers from birth. We are taught that loving someone means fixing them, soothing them, and putting their needs far above our own. So when James sighed heavily and said his back hurt, I instinctively got up to fetch the heating pad. When James looked sad about his children, I instinctively spent 2 hours listening to him vent, completely draining my own precious energy reserves. I poured my vibrant energy into his empty cup day after day, week after week. Let us talk about the absolute cost of this emotional labor. Think about what I could have been doing with those Tuesday afternoons. I could have been reading a spectacular novel in my sunny garden. I could have been taking a watercolor painting class. I could have been taking a nap simply because I felt like taking a nap. Instead, I was functioning as an unpaid therapist. When a man relies on you to regulate his emotions, he steals the peace you worked 50 years to secure. You become the shock absorber for all the bumps in his life. If he has a bad day, your day is automatically ruined. If he is feeling grumpy, the entire atmosphere of your beautiful sanctuary turns dark and heavy. This is not true love. This is extreme dependency wrapped up in the romantic title of having a boyfriend. It is a one-sided transaction where you pay all the emotional taxes. Women over 45, listen to my voice very carefully. Your caregiving days should be firmly behind you. You raised the children. You did your duty to the world. This season of your life is supposed to be your beautiful harvest. It is supposed to be the time when you finally prioritize your own comfort, your own desires, and your own absolute joy. You did not cross the finish line of all those hard decades just to be handed another full-time job with absolutely zero pay and zero appreciation. That deep emotional exhaustion of managing another grown adult naturally bleeds right into the physical world. This brings us directly to truth number two, the complete and utter destruction of your personal sanctuary. I want you to really visualize this with me for a moment. Think about your home right now. Think about the absolute peace of a quiet Sunday morning. You wake up exactly when you want to wake up. You walk into your kitchen. You make your coffee exactly how you like it. And you sit by the window in complete silence. Your home is not just a building made of wood and glass. It is a profound physical reflection of your entire life journey. I spent 45 long years working incredibly hard. I raised my children. I pleased demanding bosses. And I survived all the heavy storms, the deep financial worries, and the sudden heartbreaks of my younger years. After all of those decades of compromising and constantly sharing my space with other people, I finally had a home that was entirely my own. It was pristine. It was quiet. It was decorated exactly how I liked it, down to the absolute last throw pillow on my cream-colored sofa. I had finally gained full and total control of my own thermostat. Then James started spending the weekends at my house. At first, it was just an extra toothbrush sitting on my bathroom counter. I thought it was sweet, but suddenly it escalated into a full home invasion. His incredibly ugly, oversized, dark brown reclining chair, appeared right in the middle of my beautiful, carefully curated living room. That chair was not just a piece of furniture, it was a physical manifestation of his massive ego taking up space in my meticulously crafted world. He started complaining that my favorite television shows were far too loud, even though he was the one who absolutely insisted on blaring the evening news all day long, filling my peaceful silence with constant anxiety and negative noise. He left wet bathroom towels scattered on my immaculate floors, expecting me to simply pick them up as if I were a maid working in a hotel. He even had the absolute audacity to question my personal financial choices. He would stand in my own kitchen, open my own refrigerator, and ask why I spent good money on expensive organic groceries when the regular ones at the discount grocery store were cheaper. He wanted to manage my money in my own house, a house he did not contribute a single dime to purchase. Why on earth would any woman who has fought so incredibly hard for her peace hand over the keys to her castle to a man who refuses to ask for driving directions but suddenly wants to direct her entire life? You do not just lose your physical space when a man like this moves into your life. You lose your fundamental freedom to simply exist comfortably in your own home. You start walking on eggshells. You adjust your sleeping schedule because he snores loudly or stays up entirely too late. You change what you cook for dinner because his stomach cannot handle spices anymore. You spend your golden years tiptoeing around a grown man and his fragile preferences. I traded the profound freedom of living alone for the constant, irritating friction of a bad roommate who honestly believed he was in charge. And this devastating loss of freedom leads me directly to the third brutal truth. Truth number 3. Men looking for girlfriends later in life often want a static museum exhibit, not a growing, evolving woman. Society tells us that when we hit 60 or 70, our story is basically over. We are just supposed to sit quietly on the front porch and watch the rest of the world go by. But that is a complete lie. By the time you reach this age, you are not fading away. You are finally ripening. You finally have the free time, the resources, and the earned wisdom to explore who you truly are outside of being a mother, a devoted wife, or a tired employee. You are finally ready to expand. I am a vibrant, deeply curious soul. One beautiful afternoon, I decided I wanted to join a local community theater group to learn how to act. I also started actively planning a spectacular solo trip to Italy. I remember standing in my kitchen holding a colorful brochure for a tow tour of Rome and Florence. I felt a spark of pure excitement that I had not felt since I was 25 years old. I bought travel books. I started learning Italian phrases, and I dreamed of walking down ancient cobblestone streets and eating real pasta under the European sun. I was expanding my horizons. I was growing into a new version of myself. I showed the brochure to James, expecting him to smile. Instead of being happy for me, instead of cheering me on like a true partner should, James sulked like a scolded child. He sat in his ugly brown reclining chair, crossed his arms, and tried to make me feel utterly ridiculous. He looked at me and asked why I needed to fly across the ocean when we had a perfectly good Italian restaurant right down the street. He asked me why I wanted to perform in a play with a bunch of strangers when I could just stay home and watch television movies with him. He actively made me feel incredibly guilty for having a rich, vibrant life that did not revolve entirely around sitting on the couch next to him. Men like James are absolutely terrified of a woman who is still learning and growing. He wanted me frozen in time. He wanted me to be a comfortable, deeply familiar background character in the movie of his own life. If I go to Italy, who is going to organize his daily pills? If I go to theater practice, who is going to make his dinner? My personal growth directly threatened his absolute comfort. When you take on a boyfriend at this age, especially one who is emotionally underdeveloped, you slowly start editing yourself again. You start shrinking your beautiful dreams. You lower your voice. You hide your own brilliant light just so he does not feel insecure. You stop sharing the new things you learn because he rolls his eyes. You cancel your exciting travel plans because he complains about his hip and says he cannot handle the long flight, and he makes you feel terrible for wanting to go without him. You freeze at the exact level of his comfort, and that is such a terrible, quiet tragedy. Women on the very edge of massive personal transformation, choosing to hold themselves back simply to keep an ordinary man comfortable. Do not ever let a man convince you that your desire for grand adventure is foolish. Do not let him clip your magnificent wings just because he is too tired to fly. Your 70s can be the most expansive, spiritually awake decade of your entire life. But you cannot climb a high mountain if you are dragging a heavy anchor behind you. This devastating loss of personal freedom and the tragic shrinking of my beautiful, hard-earned dreams brings me directly to the fourth and final brutal truth. This is the ultimate psychological trap keeping so many brilliant, capable women stuck in these completely draining, lifeless situations. Truth number 4: the absolute lie of loneliness. Society brainwashes women from the time we are very young girls playing with dolls. They condition us into believing that aging alone is the absolute worst possible fate a human being can ever suffer. They make us fear the quiet moments in an empty room. They try to convince us that a woman sitting alone in her own home, drinking a cup of hot tea by herself, is somehow a terrible tragedy waiting to be rescued by a man. The world relies incredibly heavily on the toxic story that says, at your mature age, you should just be incredibly grateful that any man wants to look at you or spend his time with you. They use the deep, paralyzing fear of loneliness as a weapon to make you settle for absolute mediocrity. They tell you that having a warm body sitting next to you on the sofa is always better than sitting by yourself. But they absolutely do not tell you how incredibly cold that warm body can actually be. This is exactly how a vibrant, intelligent 71-year-old woman like me finds herself functioning as a full-time nurse, an emotional dumping ground for a man who does not even ask how her day was. We are completely terrified of the societal judgment that comes with being a single older woman. We are terrified of our own adult children asking us why we have not found someone to share our golden years with. So we accept a telephone call here, a half-hearted compliment there, and we desperately convince ourselves that this tiny crumb of affection is somehow better than an empty house. We trade our precious, hard-earned peace of mind for the grand illusion of companionship. But let me tell you about the Tuesday evening I completely shattered that powerful illusion. It was a chilly evening in late November. I had spent the entire morning cleaning my beautiful home, baking fresh bread from scratch, and looking forward to reading a massive new historical biography I had just purchased at the bookstore. But James had come over completely uninvited, complaining of a mild headache and a terrible mood. For 4 straight hours, I was held emotionally hostage in my very own living room. I was sitting on my beautiful, expensive, cream-colored sofa right next to James. He was complaining bitterly about the evening weather forecast for the 4th time that exact same day, acting as if the incoming rain was a direct personal insult directed entirely at him. The television was blaring a deeply depressing, loud news channel that he absolutely refused to turn off. Even though he knew I hated the constant buzzing noise, His massive, ugly, dark brown reclining chair was completely ruining the perfect aesthetic harmony of my living room. I stopped reading my book. I closed the cover and I just looked over at him. I watched him chew his food incredibly loudly. I listened to his endless, exhausting list of negative grievances about his former wife, his ungrateful children, his former boss, and his aching joints. He did not ask me about my book. He did not ask me about my day. He simply sat there, absorbing my vibrant energy like a massive black hole in the middle of my sanctuary. In that exact moment, underneath the obnoxious noise of the blaring television, I had a profound and deeply life-changing realization. It hit me like a massive bolt of lightning. I looked around my gorgeous house, the house I had paid for with my own blood, sweat, and tears over 45 years of hard work, and I realized I felt more incredibly, heartbreakingly lonely sitting right next to James than I ever did when I lived completely alone. This is the great, powerful secret that society desperately tries to hide from women over 45. A bad relationship does not cure your loneliness. It violently and painfully amplifies it. There is absolutely no loneliness more profound, no isolation more devastating than sitting in the exact same room with a man who does not truly see you, who does not value your magnificent personal growth, and who treats you like a comfortable household appliance rather than a sacred romantic partner. You feel completely invisible in your own home. A quiet house is never an empty house. A quiet house is full of your own spirit, your own peace, your own memories, and your own boundless potential. A quiet house is a beautiful canvas where you get to paint the final, most glorious masterpiece of your entire life. That very night, I made a definitive choice. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not throw a dramatic temper tantrum. I simply stood up. I possessed the quiet, terrifying power of a woman who has finally had absolutely enough. I walked over to the kitchen counter, picked up his plastic daily pill organizer, and handed it directly to him. I walked over to the television and turned it completely off. James looked at me in total shock. I looked right back into his eyes and told him to pack up his bags. I told him he would need to call his adult son in the morning to come and retrieve his ugly brown reclining chair because I was moving it out to the garage immediately. And then I politely but firmly showed him to my lovely front door. James tried to manipulate me. He tried to make me feel small. He told me I was making a huge mistake. He stood on my front porch and told me that no other man was going to want a stubborn, difficult 71-year-old woman. He told me I was going to end up a lonely old woman with absolutely nobody to care for me when I got sick. I just smiled at him. It was not a sweet smile. It was the sharp, knowing smile of a woman who has entirely reclaimed her own soul. I looked at him and said, I would rather spend the next 20 years talking to my indoor house plants than spend one more evening listening to him complain about the rain. And then I closed the door. I locked the heavy metal deadbolt. The moment his car finally backed out of my driveway, I did not feel a single ounce of regret. I did not feel lonely. I walked back inside to the center of my living room and took a massive, deep breath. I felt a heavy, suffocating weight completely lift off my chest. The oppressive, anxious energy he had brought into my space vanished into thin air. I walked over to my thermostat and turned the heat up exactly 2 degrees, just the way I liked it. I could finally breathe again. I realized that my purpose in this final glorious chapter of my life was not to be chosen by a man. My ultimate purpose was to finally unapologetically choose myself. Choosing your own absolute peace over a mediocre, draining boyfriend is never a failure. Do not ever let anyone tell you it is a failure. It is the ultimate victory of a life incredibly well lived. You have paid your heavy dues to society. You have wiped the tears, cooked the endless meals, balanced the checkbooks, and compromised your own desires for decades. You have survived the terrible storms. You are the absolute prize, and your daily peace of mind is your absolute greatest treasure. Do not ever let a man who cannot even manage to schedule his own doctor appointments convince you that you are somehow incomplete without his physical presence. If a magnificent man comes along who truly adds deep joy to your life, who respects your boundaries, who loudly applauds your personal growth, and who absolutely does not need you to act as his mother, his therapist, or his nurse, then that is wonderful. That is a beautiful, unexpected bonus. But until that incredibly rare man appears, you are entirely allowed to say no. You are entirely allowed to protect your time, your energy, and your heart. Like the sacred temple, it truly is. You are not a free rehabilitation center for emotionally underdeveloped men who refuse to grow up. You are a whole, complete, and deeply lovable woman exactly as you are right this very second. Your life is yours again. Guard it fiercely. I want to hear from you right now. Have you ever compromised your own hard-earned peace just to keep a man comfortable? Or have you finally chosen your own beautiful sanctuary and asked him to leave? Go down to the comments and tell me, music, your personal story right now. Do not forget to like this video, share it with a friend who really needs to hear this exact truth music today, and subscribe to the channel if you are absolutely ready to stop apologizing for your magnificent independence.